Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome yet again to another episode of Lunch Guide. I am your host Chef Andy, and today we are going to be playing with a very beautiful pastry stroke sweet dish that you can easily be able to do for yourselves at home. We're going to be playing with some mixed berries, we're going to be playing with some pastry, and without taking any more of your time, we're just going to start with our ingredients here. So here I have some beautifully homemade short crust pastry. So this has been chilling in the fridge for the last 1 hour. I've got some brown sugar, I've got some vanilla extract, I've got some vodka, just regular absolute vodka. I've got some softened butter, some all-purpose flour, some white sugar, some beautiful berries there in the juices. And then here I've got some green grams, which we're going to be using for the blind baking process, which you'll be able to see much later. So we're just going to take a small commercial break, and when we come back, we're just going to go into the dish. See you then. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, from the short break. For those who missed out on the introduction, we're going to be making a very, very simple berry dish today. We're going to be working with some mixed berries, and we're going to be working with some short crust pastry that we made from home. So I'm just going to start by explaining to you what the pastry is about. So short crust pastry is a beautiful pastry crust that we're going to be using to reinforce our tart. Basic ingredients to that is equal quantities of flour to sugar, about half of that quantity of cold water. Work that, keep that in the fridge. The dough should be able to rest at least for overnight if you're going to be making this dish in the day to come. So as simple as that. For those of you who might find it difficult to find a recipe or make it at home, there is also convenient short crust pastry that you can buy at your regular outlets. So without further ado, I'll just show you what we're going to do with the berries first. So I've got a pan here that's going on low heat. So basically what we're going to do, this is a process where we're going to be flavoring our berries. We're just going to be getting them ready for the filling process. So remember, this is the filling itself, and this is where actually all the action happens. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to start with my berries. So I've got a cup of berries there in their own juice, which is just gonna go into the pot here. It's gonna bring my heat to medium. And then to that, very simply, I'm just going to add 1 teaspoon of vanilla essence. I'm gonna add 1 shot of vodka, and I'm gonna add half a cup of sugar. Just regular white sugar or regular brown sugar will do. Right. So now what we're going to do is basically we're just going to cook this down. We're just going to get all those flavors to absorb. What we're looking for is a somewhat thick but not very runny mixture. Remember, this is a mixture that's going to be going into our filling that we're going to be doing shortly. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to turn that to low heat, and I'm just going to let that continue on the side. And now in the meantime, we're just going to get our workstation ready. And now what I'm going to show you is how to roll out your pastry. So remember, the technique is very simple. It could be, for those of you who are trying it out for the first time, it could be a little tricky, but as I always say, it's always important to try your recipes occasionally. If you're going to be showcasing a dish, I always recommend try it in advance, take notes, watch some cooking shows. For instance, this one, be able to find out which areas you can actually perfect, which areas you can improve on. Okay, so nice beautiful roll there of our pastry. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to use my fingertips and split it into two, because we're just going to be making 2 of these today. So nice, easy technique there. So I'm just going to show you the bowls we're going to be working with. We're going to be using this. So these are oven proof. Remember, if you're going to be using any dishes for the oven, make sure they are actually oven proof and you are allowed to use them in the oven. Otherwise, what would happen is they would crack as soon as you throw them in there. And what would happen is you'd end up with a totally different thing altogether. Okay. So I'm just going to grab some flour. Just going to dust my board lightly on the top, and all I'm going to do is give this a nice press on one side, turn it over, nice press on the other, and lastly a bit of dust on top. This is just to make sure it doesn't stick to the rolling pin, and lastly just a little bit of flour on the pin itself. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to work from the center going forward, and then I'm going to work from the center rolling back. Remember, it's a delicate pastry. You don't want to roll it out like you would do for most doughs. This is a little more fragile, so be careful when you're rolling this out. It could break easily. So I'm just going to dust a little bit more, and I'm just going to work that. As I said, work from the center outwards and from the center towards you. This basically allows you to spread out the dough a little more easier on your surface. Right, so we're just gonna give that a nice beautiful dusting. Now all we are going to do is we're just going to dust a bit of flour in our ramekin there. Remember, in this process we don't want to grease the bowl, because what we want is a beautiful crusty pastry. We don't want it to be soggy. The reason why we are not dusting this bowl particularly is because we don't want it to get any soft or any soggy on the inside, and because of the butter content in the dough itself, it's definitely not going to be sticking onto our bowl. So I'm just going to grab that with my rolling pin like that. I always find it easier to lift my pastry like this, and all I'm going to do is spread it right over the bowl like that. And using my hands, I'm just going to lift this off the sides just to be able to allow the pastry to sink right to the bottom of the dish. So we're just going to make sure that goes right around. Right, so once you have the pastry getting to the bottom of the dish, make sure it actually touches the bottom of your container. All we are going to do, I'm just going to use a pizza cutter. You can use a regular knife for that process as well. So all I'm going to do is use my pizza cutter to get rid of all that excess dough. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make sure my dough is sitting really well right around the ramekin. So always just use your fingertips, just work your way around it. Remember to also tuck in any of the edges that stick out at the top. Alright, so very simple. And then what I'm going to do with the remaining bit of the pastry, I'm just going to cut some strips off there, which we're just going to use to finish off the dish. So all I'm going to do is just firmly give that a nice press right around the edges like that. And I'm just going to do the same thing right around the bowl. Remember, this is just to give it a bit of a presentation at the end when it comes out of the oven. Right, I'm just gonna take a few more pieces. I'm just going to do the same, and I'm just going to go around the bowl. Remember to take off any excess bits that you can't really fold in there. Right, very simple. Okay, so as I said earlier, just make sure that the pastry touches the bottom of your dish before you start finishing the top and the sides. This is particularly important because you don't want to be pouring your mixture in there and having it drag all your pastry to the bottom of the dish. Right, so very simple. I'm just going to set up this particular one that we're going to do first. Right, so this we could definitely do a bit more of it later, so I'm just going to keep that in the fridge. Remember, it's particularly important to keep your short crust pastry cold. You don't want it to warm up too fast because the butter is going to melt in the first case. And secondly, once you have all the butter melted, you're definitely not going to get the exact thing you are looking for. So just back to our berry coulis that's been going now for about 4 to 5 minutes. So beautiful aromas coming from the pan. You can definitely get the hint of the vanilla. You can definitely get that berry flavor coming through. So remember, we just want to cook this and thicken it a little bit. We don't want it to be too runny, hence otherwise we're not going to be able to get a nice richness to it. So what we're going to do now, we're going to take a short commercial break, and when we come back, I'm going to show you the finishing of the dish. I'm going to show you how to also fill this. I'm going to show you how to bake it in the oven, and we're also going to give that about another 4-5 minutes to cook off. As soon as it thickens, we're just going to take it off the heat. We're going to allow it to cool. We're going to add it to our pastry, and then we're just going to throw it in the oven. We're also going to make a crumble. That's a very simple process, which we're all going to do after the short break. See you in a little bit. Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back from the short break. For those who missed out on what we were doing today, we were making a very simple berry tart that we're going to be finishing off now. So I'm just gonna quickly shove this in the oven just to finish it off. And that will be going for the top element for about 10 minutes, and then it will be ready. In the meantime, I'm just going to recap on what most of you missed in that process. So what we did is we started off the show with a bit of short crust pastry and a bit of berry coulis that we cooked with some vodka, some brown sugar and some vanilla extract. And then we basically came up also with this particular tartlets that I want to explain to you now. So basically the idea behind making a very good tartlet case is two things. First of all, it's good quality pastry, and second of all, it's the baking technique that you use. So as you can see in this bowl here, I have some green grams, just regular green grams, and then I also have some wax paper. So basically the idea of using this is a process called blind baking. So it's a process whereby we basically have our pastry, our short crust pastry, go around the board. We just fit it right in there. And then what we do is, I actually like to use this technique because it helps you to get rid of the green grams a little easier after baking. So all I did was I took a nice wide sheet of wax paper or parchment paper. And then I used green grams, but you're not limited to using anything such as beans. You can use some rice that you don't really have work for much later, rice that you're not going to cook, or green grams that you don't need at the moment. So remember, for the green grams, this is basically just to tie down the weight. It gives the pastry a bit of a press off the top. So what happens is your pastry cooks right through at an even thickness and definitely just comes out to give you that last bit of cup that you're looking for. So I showed you how to basically do the filling for those who were with us earlier. And now basically this is an example of one that's already done. So all I'm going to do now is show you how this comes off after baking. So all I do is I just nicely give it a squeeze right towards its neck. and all I do is take it out. So as you can see, this is the same thing that just came out of here, and all that you're left with is a beautiful pastry crust. So this I'm just going to take out of the bowl now, and you can be able to see. So this is a little delicate, it's breaking up now, but the one that's gone in the oven, what happens with that one particularly, we take it out halfway, so basically to the same temperature this cooked for. We then cook it for another few minutes after putting in the filling, so that it now comes in as a biscuit, and it's definitely going to hold its shape. All right, so this I'm just going to throw back in the bowl here, and we're just gonna get rid of this. So remember, ladies and gentlemen, you're not restricted to using green grams in this recipe. You can use some rice, you can use some beans. Just remember, it just has to be dry first of all. It doesn't have to be too heavy. It should actually be anything in relation to grains, just to be able to hold your pastry to the bottom and to actually allow it to cook evenly right through. All right, so this is about 2 minutes done. So I'm just going to recap on what's in front of you. So basically, whatever you have in front of you now is some of the products you can actually be able to make by using the same particular pastry, the pastry that we used, which was short crust. So I've managed to be able to make some beautiful cookies here that have been stuffed with some dark and some white chocolate. And I've also got some beautiful treats here that have actually just gone into a simple mold. You can be able to do the same thing with your ice cream tray, but remember, an ice cream tray will not definitely go in the oven. What you could do is use it to make the molds, freeze them, take them out, give them just a few minutes to thaw in room temperature and bake them, and you'll definitely get something similar to that. If you definitely have time to go out there and look at the shops, you can actually get some rubber molds that are very good, and they actually hold their temperature in the oven. So without further ado, I'm just going to take you back to the main dish that we are working on today. And basically, in this little pot here, this little glass here, I have a bit of the coulis that we actually reserved from the berries that we cooked earlier with some vodka and some vanilla and some sugar. So I'm going to be using a bit of that for presentation. All right, and I've also got some star anise seeds. Remember, you're not limited to garnish the same way we do it. You can always try your own way. So I'm just going to show you some simple techniques of how I like to garnish my pastry when it's out of the oven. So I like to work with a bit of cinnamon powder here. So remember, cinnamon powder, first of all, is it enhances a bit of flavor to the dish, and second of all, it gives that beautiful appearance when you're plating. So all I'm going to do with the help of my board here, I'm just going to place some cinnamon in my sieve there. So I just put just a bit enough, it's just enough for it to be able to give me a few shakes to get my garnish on the plate. So a small sieve, remember, if you have a plastic or metallic one, it doesn't really matter. Right? So this is about done now. Just gonna give that some time and we take it out. So I'm just gonna easily put a spoon right in the middle of my plate, and all I'm going to do is give it a shake right towards the end, and I'm just gonna put that aside. So by lifting your spoon, you can be able to see very simple garnishing techniques. Right, so we're just going to grab this and take it out of the oven. So this is now nice and dark on the edges. Just gonna give that a bit of time to cool off. So as you can see, that little bit of crust that we put on top of the pastry earlier on in the show. So the idea is basically to be able to have it cook right through, but what happens is in most cases, might get that little bit of dark ring on the top. So I'm just going to show you what to do in such a case. Right, so I'm just going to grab a cloth here. I'm just gonna take this off the baking tray. So very, very simple, ladies and gentlemen. As I said, very simple technique of making your own tart at home. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to use my knife to work right around the board. Remember, the bowl is a little hot, so you don't want to hold this with your fingers right after it comes out of the oven. Right, so I'm just, because now the biscuit is actually cooked, it's nice and crispy, so all I have to do is just give it a nice gentle press on the sides and it just easily breaks off. Right, so easy peasy. Just gonna give that a bit of a wipe. All right, ladies and gentlemen, very simple technique there. So we're just going to move that onto our plate here. We're just going to get rid of that. So as I said, simple finishing off techniques. I always like to use just a bit of brown sugar. Just sprinkle a bit of that on top. I also had some chocolate that we had earlier, some shaved chocolate that I had reserved. So I could just use that, just put a bit of decoration, just spread a bit also on top of your tart, let it melt onto that crust. Right, very simple. And now last but not least, our coulis that we reserved earlier that you're more than welcome to serve with your dish. Alright, so nice, simple, easy, quick, economic way to make use of those berries that you've been keeping in the freezer for so long. Maybe it's a bit of pastry that you had from an earlier session and you just thought of trying out a few new things from your pantry to your table. So I have been able to turn something that I found in my pantry to be actually a three-way kind of entertainment, kind of finishing off the part of your dish for the after dish, part of something you can actually serve after your mains. It's been a pleasure cooking with everyone today. For viewers at home, I hope you've been entertained. For those who actually have a few questions or any recommendations, do visit our Facebook page, leave your comment, leave your inquiries, leave any questions. It's me, your host, Chef Andy. It's been a pleasure being with you today. For those who are going to be enjoying Shujaa Day tomorrow, I'm going to be enjoying my Shujaa Day as well. So from myself and from the studio, it's been a pleasure. Have a lovely day. See you soon.